Yes. Hello, everybody. This is a podcast. I'm off to a great start already.
Uh-huh.
This is yeah. I'm joined by our Tats team researcher,
And
EvilDeathAzul. I just call him
and
Azul.
and, and official boot kisser.
Okay, and that's his title now. He's an official boot kisser, while I just stick by the professional idiot.
Yeah,
I'm
and I'm
I'm
in, I'm the
blackendrose, recorder, scriptwriter. I suppose you could say amateur researcher as well, and residential emulator.
and professional idiot.
I've already said professional idiot, but yeah, let's do that again.
It's on your I mean, to be fair, it is on your Twitter.
Yeah, that's true. And
And yeah,
this little podcast that we've got going here is it's a little bit different from the original idea I was going to have for doing gameplay based podcasting. We're calling this the researcher review because one of the things that my glorious counterpart does is
I
he looks through walkthroughs of games that we've got on our listings so that we can better rank and list them.
to be specific, it's when we're researching a list that's a specific genre of game, not like, say for example, when we did shotguns, I didn't look up the walkthrough to a game that had the shotgun. I focused on that. We focused on that specific item. But say for example, when we did indie horror games, that's a specific genre.
Mm-hmm.
So we did the research. I watched full walkthroughs, like you did this one, Slender the Arrival. I watched a full walkthrough to that.
Yes. Yeah, generally, if a list requires us to put in the entirety of the game, then we'll go through like full walkthroughs of the game. Whereas if we're
Yeah,
doing something like, I don't know, just off the top of my head, spider entries, for example.
you're an ass.
Yes. Hey,
Let it be known
I've been
we
recording
are
this shit as well.
we are both big arachnophobes. We hate anything that has 8 legs.
And now I'm going to be getting pictures of spiders on my Twitter.
Yeah, and it's most likely going to start with me.
Yeah, but I'll just send them back.
Okay, so Blacken, I got a question.
Yes.
What's the first thing you think when I say "Ride to Hell Retribution"?
I think, look, there's a turd on that motorbike.
Yes. So we have just finished watching a walkthrough to Ride to Hell Retribution. It's on our upcoming list, the worst video games list.
Mm-hmm.
And I had heard things about it. I'd never seen the game. I've seen bits and pieces, but I never took the time to either buy the game and play it myself for obvious reasons. I'm not willing to shell out money for it, or the fact that it just never really caught my attention because at the time when it was quote unquote popular, I think the best word is like infamously popular.
Yeah, this is one of those games where I totally recommend people buying it, not for the sake of playing a good game, but
It's for the experience.
well, I've said this term before, but it's literally roll up, come see the freak.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, granted, trying to get a hold of a copy now is not exactly easy because digital distribution has taken it down from all their stores, so you'd have to get physical copies or try and emulate the bugger.
Yeah, which not easy because it was the 360, although I know the 360 is easier to emulate. The best way to get it is just hope you can find a physical copy for the 360 or for PC because both had physical copies of the game. But so the premise of the game is you play a Vietnam War vet. He just got back from the war, and he goes to his hometown in Dead End, which I believe is in California. And given what it looks like, it's the very southern part of California, probably bordering on the Mexican border. And he goes to see his adoptive uncle Mac and his little brother, and they go out into town, and in the process, the little brother ends up getting killed by a bunch of gang members from this gang called the Devil's Hand. And the main character, which was what was his name?
I think it was like Jake something.
Jake, yeah, Jake. And Jake goes on a rampage going after the gang members who had a hit put on them. And it's not until about halfway through the game you realize that there was a hit put on the family, which kind of made it feel, I don't know, you felt left out, I would say.
It's interesting to think, because I didn't know about the, like, because I didn't watch the whole walkthrough. I watched probably like about half to 2/3 of it, so there
Yeah,
was like missed. But it is interesting to think that there was a hit put out on them, and I feel like that kind of breaks down some of the motivation of the entire plot.
Yeah. Well, basically what happened was that their father was in the same gang as this gang leader, as the leader of the Devil's Hand. And when the father didn't keep a deal with him, he put a hit on the father and then put a hit on the whole family. But as I said, you don't find out that until about halfway through the game. So at the whole time, you're just like, oh, so these random gang members like recognized the jacket and then decided to kill you just out of the fun of it, instead of knowing that, oh, there's an actual hit. So it didn't feel realistic at the time.
It kind of feels like one of those scenarios where Jake could have avoided a lot of the conflict just by seeing a tailor. Like this whole idea of, like, they recognised him because he dressed that way. It's like, okay, that's not much of a motivation to go by.
Was it Jake's jacket or the kid's jacket?
Either way, it's one of those cases of very thin like conflict motivations. I mean,
yeah, very
like,
much.
Jake had a reason to be like pissed off because his little brother was killed in front of him and I've got to point this out, in a very weirdly done scene.
I know what scene you talk about. So what happened was we're not getting demonetized anyway because you don't make money. So they slit the brother's throat, and then suddenly they shoot Jake, and then 2 seconds later, Jake is standing in the gas station, and apparently we were watching a flashback.
Well, what the funny thing was is that they're depicting the scene as it's happening now. And then Jake gets shot, and then it comes back to Jake standing there, and then we see a grayed out flashback of the scene we just saw 10 seconds ago.
It was
like they replayed the scene again with a grey filter over it, as if to say, I've come here, but I've come back here again, and I'm remembering this. Like, yeah, it's the scene we just saw 10 seconds ago. We don't need another flashback of it.
You see, it would have been better, like, if they did that whole scene, because I remember at the beginning of the game, the game said 10 days earlier. Which I get that meant it was a flashback-ish, but the way it wrote it just kind of wrote it off afterwards, and you spent about half an hour watching this game, and you completely forget it's a flashback. And if it was me who was creating it, I'm not a game designer, obviously. But I would have at least put a kind of filter on during the gameplay to make it seem like, oh yeah, we're still in a flashback.
Well, this has happened in a little bit of a weird way before, and there's another shitty game, Sonic Boom, Rise of Lyric. The game started with showing Sonic basically dying under a load of rubble. That was the first 5 seconds of the game, and then it jumps to and then it just jumps to black and says 2 days earlier, and then the game actually starts. And it's like that's the sort of thing that sometimes happens, is that they get the whole congruity of the timeline really out of place. They didn't have to do this whole, here's a flashback scene that you play for half an hour and now we're back to present day. They could have just done it as, here's plot happening, then just do a time skip, and then you're playing the rest of the game. They've gone out of their way to try and set up a flashback then do a very condensed form of it with a filter on it, and then
Yeah.
start the rest of the game. It's like, it feels like they didn't know what they were doing with that whole scene.
Well, let's not forget the time skip they did as well, because
Yeah.
you didn't know it was there.
Like
We
that-
were legit confused.
Like, that's the thing, is that they threw various elements together as if they'd sort of decided one thing, then changed their mind a little bit later on, and then changed it again, but didn't change anything to reflect that.
Well, and it really comes down to this game was in development. It wasn't even hiatus. It was in development hell. Like, this game was in development off and on.
Yes, and
Originally, yeah.
yeah, I think we should bring up the point on that, which I think you was about to do, which is the game started out under one developer whose name escapes me. And
I've got my phone here. I'll look it up.
yeah, basically the original developer was creating a open world sandbox game.
Kind of similar to GTA.
Yeah. I mean, like, we've made this point before that it feels like that Retribution was trying to be Lost and the Damned.
Pretty much, along with a couple other things, but that one's the biggest one.
Yeah, and it started out as attempting to be a sandbox game, but then it was put, as you said, it was like dumped in development hell, and then another studio picked it up and turned it into a linear, like, I hesitate to use the term story-driven game. But
Let's see.
yeah.
No, it's this. Okay, so Eutechnics worked on the game. I don't think it had a different developer.
Well, I know it went from one studio to another.
Well, there were two studios, but it was Deep Silver, which has worked on Saints Row the Third. And they were working together with Eutechnics at the time. Oh, no. Deep Silver Vienna, which was one of the production company as well, had closed down in 2010, and Eutechnics continued to design the game without them. That's what happened.
Right. Okay. So the original studio closed down, and
Yeah.
the
secondary studio
yeah.
continued it.
It kind of shows, really, because as we saw in the game, you could clearly see how it was supposed to be an open world game, especially with the weird transitions between long driving segments and then to here's the location you go to, whereas normally in a GTA game, you would just drive through the open world to reach the mission site and then do the mission.
Yeah.
And I pointed out many a time that pretty much all of the driving sequences was just the same bit of desert track.
Pretty much.
It's basically the same backdrop all the time. Yeah, they jazzed up the tracks a little bit, but it was always just an outback, deserty, craggy cliff sort of area. And you'd literally go from like towns and cities, transition to this like desert wasteland.
Not to mention that they were super, super long, and I think it had to do with the fact that they still had the map for the open world, and what they did was they took a couple routes from that map and made them into levels. That's why they seem so long.
Yeah. And like some of the levels, especially like the cityscape levels, you can clearly see that it was an open world area that just had a bunch of invisible walls thrown into it to keep it condensed.
Yeah.
Which, like, it just feels so tacky to do that. Like, they should have just gone with the open world idea and just rolled with it.
Yeah, actually, it probably would have been a better game because I would expect them to put a lot more effort into an open world game.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is that like the biggest element with an open world game is like making a living world. Throwing missions and like things like that into it becomes the easy bit.
Mm-hmm.
But
when you're doing,
they sort of did the worst of both worlds. They took an open world idea and threw it into a linear world, but kept in elements of the open world. And it's like they didn't need those long driving segments.
No, and Um, God, just the gameplay itself.
Oh god, and the glitches.
I think my biggest advice about the game is that whenever you threw a grenade, its splash damage was so powerful that you could toss the grenade across the freaking world and it would still hit you.
Yeah, they didn't quite understand how to do explosives correctly, because they seem to have this unholy tendency to explode and then damage you even if you was like in a different postcode.
Yeah. You would get stunned, which means that you can't shoot when you're stunned. I've noticed that. You can't shoot. You cannot crouch, which leaves you very open, especially because everybody's stun time is the same, except for those big hockey mask guys. They don't get stunned.
Yes.
At least not that I'm aware of. And so it leaves you in a very bad position. And then, physics, the game doesn't physics. Like, I've seen better physics in freaking Gmod.
I've seen better physics in Goat Simulator.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the trouble is, it wandered into the problem of, yes, if you was close to a grenade exploding without necessarily being caught in the explosion, yeah, you would probably be in a state of like stunned shock or something like that. It's like they added a certain amount of realism in there, but that kind of realism doesn't lend itself to good shootery gameplay.
No.
And that was the biggest problem. Especially one of the funniest problems I used to see was cover-based mechanics.
Knee-high walls.
Yes. Now, when you hide behind cover, generally the game turns off your hit detection, so that if someone is firing at the cover and your body model is slightly peeking over because they got the models, they didn't get the models right, you're not taking damage.
At this point, they defined the hitbox way too well. Because for some reason, number one, Jake does not know how to crouch.
Nope.
Because his head sticks out like a freaking thumb. Number two, knee-high wall is very breakable for some reason.
Yeah. And
that's a common element in different games. I know I've been playing Sleeping Dogs. That's common. The knee-high stuff can actually break depending on what you're hiding behind. But in this game, it's not. It doesn't work. It's trying to play the Gears tactics, and we'll come back to the Gears of War thing later, because there's another element that bugged the hell out of both of us. And he knows what I'm talking about. But anyway, it's just first of all, the enemies are super accurate. They know where they're shooting, and when they're shooting at you while you're behind a knee-high wall and the knee-high wall is not doing its job, it makes the knee-high walls pretty much impractical.
Yeah, it turns into this really weird situation of, yes, you can hide behind the cover, but it's anybody's guess if the cover is actually going to help you.
Mm.
And since it does the Gears of War thing of when you go into cover, you basically enter into a relationship with the wall, and you just attach yourself to it.
Well, that's what's supposed to happen.
Yeah,
Jake never actually gets near it.
What I'm saying is that when that happens, is that you're generally locked to the wall, and if you're taking damage while locked to the wall, you've then got to detach yourself from the wall,
which takes an extra like half a second.
Yes, and like in Gears of War, that's not really a problem because the thing you're attached to is generally protecting you from the bullets in front of you.
Yes,
that's not the case in this. It's anybody's guess whether it's going to protect you from the bullets coming at you. And suddenly, like a cover-based shooter can't rely on cover. That's one of the core elements.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is I believe there was a difficulty setting for the game, but yes, I do remember there was a difficulty setting because whenever the walkthrough we watched, when the guy died, it would always ask, "Do you want to change your difficulty?"
Yes. Do you want to change your difficulty down to easy?
But one of the things I noticed was the enemies are really, really accurate, and I was pretty sure he was playing it on normal, which is the second easiest. So like for normal mode, they were getting some decent shots onto the guy, and I mean, no offense to the guy playing, he wasn't the best player, but at the same time, this is not the best game. So, like, I think it's the AI was a little too smart in that game, in some points.
I'm not sure.
I say some points because I know where you're gonna go with this.
Well, it's not so much that I don't necessarily think that it was a case of the AI was smarter or not. I think it was more a case of they just didn't balance the game properly.
No, the difficulty curve was not fair.
Like, the difficulty like you have sequences where you're on the bike and you're just like doing QTEs to kick them off, and like they're painfully easy, and you have sequences where just a bunch of melee dudes are charging at you in a nice big conga line, and you just pick their heads off. And then
I remember.
And there's other bits when you're just dealing with a firefight, and they've somehow developed all the skills of a bloody master marksman.
Well, and one of the other things I remember is during one of the driving sections, one of the last ones actually, the QTEs were unfair because you only got to maybe a second and a half to button mash, because that was one of the QTE styles, was button mashing. I remember the guy dying so much because the QTE was so short for some reason. Now, I don't know if it was because of the difficulty curve or because of coding error, but
I think it's another one of those instances of where they didn't balance the game properly. Like, there's a lot of areas in the game where you can really feel it's unbalanced, either too easy or too hard.
Yeah. Because very much in the middle of the game, you'd have to deal with like a super, super easy boss, and then 2 levels later, you're like dealing with the hardest boss you could.
Yeah, and like a lot of people come to me and say Dark Souls is hard, it's unfair. It's like no. It's a hard game, but it's fair. It's balanced.
Dark Souls difficulty curve is very balanced. In fact, it's almost a flat curve.
Well, it's a flat curve, but it's a very high flat curve.
Yeah.
So like its barrier to entry is really high, but once you get in there, then it doesn't tend to go up any more than that. It just stays relatively reasonable, but it's fair. It's balanced.
Yes.
And like Right to Hell Retribution is not balanced, and that stinks of a lack of playtesting.
Yeah, exactly. We were actually waiting for the credits to see if it actually had a QA team.
Did it?
No, yeah, it did, but it like had a QA team of 7. So I know for a fact that QA team was tiny, because when I worked a contract job for a specific company, I can't say the name. I was part of a temporary QA team, so our names weren't put on the game, but I know for a fact I've seen the credits to that specific game. The QA team was about 40 to 50 people. So, and this is a AAA game compared to AAA shit.
Yeah, and eagle-eared viewers will probably have noticed that we've mentioned other games in relation to this, such as Gears of War. It's very obvious the things that this game has been trying to rip off.
The camera. Remember the running anime? Running.
The camera has tried to rip off from a few things, as well as the over-the-shoulder setup has ripped off from a few setups. The fact that when you're jogging, I use the term jogging loosely, the camera is
shaped like Gears of War.
But then when you start running, it starts jiggling around, and it's like there's no reason for that. Like in that, it makes sense in Gears of War because you're in a war shooter.
Yeah, but this is not really. This is just a bunch of angry men with guns shooting each other. You know, the epitome of America.
Yeah, and then you get into the melee combat, which is basically a rip-off of Arkham Asylum.
Arkham Asylum and
like Assassin's Creed as well. Yeah,
because Assassin's Creed, especially Assassin's Creed 3.
Well, it's not so much counter combat, but it uses the locks onto them, punch them, and if you attack someone else, your character does this sort of Roomba slide.
It does use the counter combat though. because there's a little symbol above their head, and you can press spacebar or whatever button to actually counter them.
Yes. And so it's basically ripped counter combat from that. And like I say, it's done it poorly, because what tends to happen in Batman Arkham Asylum, as you know, is that when you move on to another character, Batman does a sort of...
He dives.
He dives or does an acrobatic maneuver to sort of move himself into position. In Retribution, you just slide across to the next person. Like you're on some sort of energetic Roomba.
We're not talking like sliding on your knees. No, he legitimately slides on his feet.
Yeah, they just shift the model into position to do what it needs to. And then, of course, we have the glorious, what I can only... Is this supposed to be like a rip on God of War, where he just sort of has a moment where the camera zooms in, he just does what can only be described as a token get angry, and then does a QTE of, like, murdering someone?
And not murdering them very well, because he doesn't use the... Like, I have a pocket knife myself, okay? Now, I've never used it, but I still know how to hold a pocket knife. This guy grabs, I can't tell if it's a hunting knife. I think it's a hunting knife, and the way he holds it, you would cut your hand, because your hand would slip over the hilt, or slip over the guard with the amount of force he pushes into it.
I'm glad you mentioned the hand, because I swear he's got some form of elephantitis.
Oh my god! Remember when the end of the game,
his hands. They look like someone has injected steroids exclusively into his hands. They are, like, when he holds a gun, like, his hands are bigger than people's heads.
Okay, here's a good example, and I'm going into spoiler territory. I'm sorry, this is a review,
No one cares. Like, this is why it's Retribution. No one cares.
At the end of the game, you're going to save this girl, Ellie, who's the daughter of the bad guy, Caesar. Or Kaiser, as Blacken once said. And
there's a reason for that.
I know. Jake goes to rub her face. His hand is bigger than her head. He could squeeze her head like a tomato if he wanted to. Well, it's that big.
That's why I like to think that Jake is reprising his role as the Incredible Hulk.
I mean, with the angry face that he puts on.
Yeah. I mean, the whole reason, like, do you know the whole bit about Kaiser and Caesar because of the way the Romans spoke their letters?
Yeah, I do. It's just whenever I think of Kaiser, because I've seen the name before, but the way I've seen it spelled, it's Kaiser, and with Caesar, it's Caeser. Yeah.
Well, I mean, for those of you wondering, it's a little bit of history lesson. Before the dominant religion of Christianity was part of the Roman way of life, the way they pronounced their C's was closer to a K. So the way we describe a Caesar, which was like the Roman emperor, they described it as Kaiser, and the best way to see that is in Fallout New Vegas, where where Caesar's Legion, if you actually work for them, they all describe Caesar as Kaiser. And anyone else who is dealing with Kaiser's Legion describes it as Caesar, because it's the Christian way of speaking.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's history lesson there. Let's get back to the shit.
Okay. Let's talk physics.
Yes, let's talk physics, because the game clearly doesn't understand how it works.
My biggest thing I can think of, and so I'm happy. I'm happy YouTube has the slow down function where you can slow your video down or speed it up. Because we did what I call forensics time.
Yes.
And I've noticed a couple things. One, when someone's running so fast, their body doesn't physics correctly, because I've actually seen a guy run and somehow his hands and his gun flow through his body behind him and then flow back. I'm
sorry, my brain just, when you was describing how their body moved, my brain just went to those weird scenes of when it did a scene transition and then Jake would just enter the scene dabbing.
Yes. Oh my, let me point out how many times I've seen that happen. Once when he had sex with a woman, and once he finished a fight.
Yeah, I remember both of those scenes. Like,
And we will get back to the women thing because that's a
yeah,
big thing on my
that's
list.
a topic in itself. I mean, like one of the things that used to happen is when it finished like a cutscene transition, there was a few times where for some reason Jake's body model would do a dab-in animation. I have no idea why, but
I'm
like
yeah.
I'm guessing it was some sort of like coding error because it didn't happen all the time, but it happened a few times.
I'm gonna also probably, because the version of the game that was being played was was the Steam version. I'm gonna probably say there's also a possibility that it is a PC coding glitch because PC versions of games they're better than console, but they're also more susceptible to glitches.
Yes, and because we had someone who was watching who had watched the console version, and even he was spotting bugs that were in the PC one that weren't necessarily in the console version. So
Yeah.
it's fair to say that what we were watching was probably a more buggy version. And considering that we had a moment where we could actually see elements of the code in the game,
that's another thing we'll be talking about later.
like there was a lot of glitches that it could be, and especially the driving sequences, which it wasn't a glitch, but it was a really poor design choice of if you hit anything square on, then you just fade to black and teleported back on the track.
Yeah, that was an interesting thing because most games would have a falling off your bike animation. I know Grand Theft Auto does it, Saints Row does it. I know for a fact Sleeping Dogs does it because I'm currently playing the game. But for some reason, they just didn't do it for this. Even though I know for a fact they do have an animation for you flying off your bike. Because I've seen the player fall into helicopter blades and see Jake fly off in splits.
Well, remember what? It's interesting you mentioned that because you remember that sequence where the guy who was playing it kept failing to jump over the helicopter.
Yes,
and we forensics the crap out of that and discovered that Jake's model just disappeared and was replaced by just an explosion of blood.
Yes, I do remember that. And then in the second sequence I can think of is when Mac and Jake are on the bike after they get attacked at the cemetery and they have to jump the helicopter blades, and you're supposed to boost to get over the helicopter blades. Yeah. And in that animation, it didn't make them disappear. They just flew off, split, flying off the bike.
Yeah.
So there is a slight animation they have. I just don't know why they don't. They had time to do one animation and went, we're going to call this good.
My best guess is that they didn't. Again, it comes down to I don't think they balanced the driving properly. So they basically went, okay, so here's a shorthand to get around this problem. We'll just spawn them back on the track, a little bit further back, and then they can just continue onwards rather than having to, fine-tune the controls. Because I swear that the bike doesn't have a good turning angle. It has a really shallow turning angle.
Which is interesting because most of the time in video games, bikes actually turn better than cars because of how small they are and how light they are.
Well, yeah, like how they're constructed. Generally, you can generally do much tighter turns with those things than you would in a car. And it kind of feels like, because there was a lot of the times in the walkthrough where he kept bouncing off the sides, and I don't necessarily think it was down to poor gameplay. It just felt like that the bike just didn't have a sharp enough turning angle.
No, it didn't. And now we watched two walkthroughs. We watched a walkthrough to the main game, and we watched a walkthrough to Cook's Recipe, which was I don't even know why they released this as a DLC. And the guy who played Cook's Recipe was a much more decent gamer than the person who played the main game. Two different YouTube channels. And even then, he still had issue dealing with driving.
Yeah, I kind of feel like it was another one of those scenarios where they sort of didn't test it, so they didn't fine tune it, and it just got left to the wayside. And let's be honest, there was a lot of elements like that where it could have. I mean, when you say anything about the DLC, because this is something I actually found out when I did a little bit of looking into it myself, they were trying to make a franchise out of this, and that fucking kills me.
Let's see. I still got the Wikipedia page out. So they were planning on making a game for. They were planning on making a game for the PS3, Xbox 360, and PC that was originally going to be released. Let's see. Or yeah, PlayStation Network and Xbox Live Arcade. It's going to be called Ride to Hell Route 666.
Yes.
Which would focus specifically on road combat. And it would have been handled by a different development company called Black Forest Games. Then they were going to plan on making a mobile game called Ride to Hell Beatdown.
Yes.
After the negative reception of the games, both concepts were scrapped.
Yes. And this is what raises the point that when they were making and released this game, they had such confidence in what they were making, in what they were putting out, that they thought that they could make a franchise out of it. Yeah. And like we've discussed this point before, when a game fails, like there have been many a time, like when Colonial Marines came out and it failed, and all the studios were basically trying to blame each other for it. And like when Bubsy 3D came out, the developers knew they couldn't compete, so they knew that these games were a bit bottom of the barrel in many cases. But when it comes to Ride to Hell Retribution, they looked at they had their finished product. They basically said, "Yep, this is going to be a big thing. We're going to make a franchise out of this. We're going to make sequels. We're going to go the whole 9 yards." And then it came out, and people collectively shat on it, and they realized, "Oh wait, this isn't going to work."
You really, really shouldn't wait till the last minute to realize your game is shit.
Well, it's somehow it feels like it fails so much more spectacularly when someone thinks that their deep-fried garbage is going to be an actual contender to anything. Like, you can understand it if a developer realizes that it's not gonna measure up to like lofty heights of like AAA gaming tends to be.
Well, like Bubsy 3D was released around the time Mario 64 was, and the developers knew it was not going to compete.
Well, I mean, the whole thing with Bubsy 3D is that was doomed to fail from the start. They didn't know how to do 3D gaming, and when they released it, they were just trying to recoup the losses by that point. Like they would have scrapped it if they hadn't gone as far as they had with it. And
most likely, yeah.
Like, the thing that depresses me about Ride to Hell Retribution is I want to see the game that it was supposed to be, like the open world game that they originally envisaged.
Envisioned?
Yes, envisioned. I said envisaged. That's a completely different thing. Yep. Ride to Hell Retribution makes me stupid. I'll put that on the cover. Ride to Hell.
I mean, it makes you run your brain capacity at 1%,
which is interesting, really, because it says 1% on the box, which is supposed to be representative of the fact that only 1% of biker gangs are actually assholes, whereas the other 99% are actually decent people. Yeah.
We're gonna move on from physics now.
Yes.
One of my favorite things was the sex scenes.
Well, that's putting it. That's a bit of a stretch to call it that. Sex requires actual penetration. This was dry humping.
My girlfriend, I love her to death. My girlfriend has made the funniest joke. She said the way they think that sex works, this game had to be made by virgins.
Honestly, I think this game was made by people who got all of their knowledge about biker gangs and people in general from watching effectively Saturday morning cartoons. Like,
I hope that's
like they really don't understand any concept. Like, there was a glorious bit, and this really sums it up, where I think it's like you go down a back alley or back area or something. You kill 5 guys in front of this woman who are trying to...
And then you bang the woman.
Trying to pressure her for sex. And basically like, yeah, I killed these 5 guys. And then you proceed to dry hump her. And then when you go back to the scene, she's disappeared.
She's gone.
You've dry humped her out of existence.
Now, let's point out the fact, one of the biggest things is that Now I know there are games that do sex. Grand Theft Auto 4 Ballad of Gay Tony is one of them.
Yes.
I know there are games that do nudity. God of War is one of them. It's infamous for doing that.
Yeah. Well, Mass Effect has done it as well.
Yeah, exactly. So I know for a game that's rated M, I know there are rules that they have to follow, but I know nudity and sex itself is not too much of an issue. It just can't show like too much lower genitalia. It definitely can't show penetration.
Well, this is the ultimate thing: is that there's a bit of a clause like it in the movie industry, which is you're allowed to show like a flaccid penis, but you can't show a erect one.
Yeah,
and it's kind of like the same things. Like when they do sex scenes in games, they can show the act, but they can't actually show the penetration or the genitalia.
They can't
show the action of the genitalia. They can show genitalia, but they can't actually show the action going on. Like in Mass Effect, they tended to do they'd show like the body models just sort of rubbing against each other in ways, or they'd show the top half with insinuations of what's going on in the bottom half.
I'm pretty sure I played a little Mass Effect. You get a lot of ass in that game. You see a lot of ass.
Yes, you do. Right. I've played through the 3 games, and I'm well aware of the scenes in that. And the thing is that it's what I would call the safe way of doing things.
Yeah, because it's basically like watching a TV show and they do a sex scene.
Yeah, they don't actually show the actual stuff going on, but it's so heavily implied, you know what's happening.
And with Mass Effect, it's realistic to a point.
Yes.
And when you get to Ride to Hell Retribution, they're not even taking clothes off; they're just dry humping each other in their shorts.
Yes, right. They've literally just taken the models of the characters with the skins on that have their clothes on, and basically just do it. The way I describe it is, it's like that those scenes you ever see of just like a girl who doesn't understand the concept of sex, and their only understanding is rubbing 2 dolls against each other.
There's an image that I'm gonna have to bleach out of my mind, but okay.
It's one of those things where it's like how are babies made, and just like they only understand like a few basic principles of 2 people coming together, and they just sort of think that mashing 2 dolls together is somehow produces a child, and it kind of feels like that's what's happened there. They just mashed these 2 body models together that could, for all we know, could have just been 2 bags of sacked potatoes.
You could have phrased that so much better.
Yeah, I know.
I'm so disappointed. I am so disappointed.
Well, it's out there now. People can humiliate me for that one.
Oh, it's going on. It's going into a team member's quote channel. Anyway,
like that basically sums up this idea, because again, it's ripping it from GTA. Like
it really is.
It's obviously ripping that whole idea from GTA in a really bare bones way of let's titillate the scenes a bit in just the worst way possible.
One of my well, here's the thing. I have respect for GTA because despite the fact that GTA has sex, guns, drugs, everything, one of the biggest things that GTA still does right is it still gives it still treats women like people.
Yes.
Whereas this game, it has a very misogynistic and almost chauvinistic manner on girls.
Well, basically, women in Ride to Hell Retribution are basically supposed to be objects of desire rather than individuals.
Exactly. They're all big bosomed. Even the girl even Ellie, who's not even sexual with Jake. They're big bosomed. They're hourglass shaped. They're quote unquote perfect looking women.
Yeah, it's interesting when they say like perfect looking women because they do the Jessica Rabbit thing of the spine doesn't bend that way.
Yeah, because the hips stick out the back, the bosom sticks out the front, and gravity should like she should be having gravity issues there.
Yeah.
And I come down to the point of when you're in the strip club and this girl is giving you information and she does a lap dance for you. And like, I actually had to pause a few moments, not for the reasons that people are looking at, because trust me, out of all the games I'd wanted to have desirable looks at women, this is not that game.
I would heavily advise you move off that topic quickly before you dig yourself into a grave.
Yeah. But I was looking at the way the model was made, and it just is not physically possible.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it just feels like they've accentuated things too much. It doesn't feel human anymore.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, the models in this game don't look human anyway.
No, they don't. Again, the elephantitis thing.
All the guys like have big hands.
Oh god, that just
big
reminded me of
body.
That reminded me of that scene we saw when the guy's neck was too long.
Oh yeah. Oh my god.
And I think
what happened?
I think he was missing a chin as well.
His jaw, for some reason, didn't render correctly. What happened was, so there's this boss fight in an abandoned airplane graveyard, and this guy has a turret, like it's a freaking military turret, and he starts shooting at you. And in the normal cutscenes, his jaw is usually there. I screenshotted this, so I know for a fact this happened. In this one screenshot, his jaw is completely gone. It looks like there is nothing in between his neck and his face. Like, his jawline is completely missing.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly can't work out how that's happened. I mean, what we kind of worked out is that the heads and the bodies were two separate models.
Yeah,
and they sort of just jammed them onto each other. So it's possible that there was a glitch with the way it rendered the head model.
That's my assumption.
But Jesus Christ, what was that?
It was terrifying.
Like, it looks like something that belongs in like a Scream movie. Or
Yeah,
out of like Grudge or something.
Exactly. My other thing, the other one that bugged me was actually on the same level, and you know where I'm going with this.
I believe so.
The criteria code that decided to actually spawn in the game.
Ah, yes. Now, I briefly mentioned this earlier about the code showing up in the game. We found out on one of the levels that for some unholy reason, a portion of the game's code had somehow attached itself to the player character, because it only showed up where the player character was, and when they moved up against an object, so obviously it brought it into view.
Yeah.
And it was basically something. It was something along the lines of all adversaries.
All the enemies are dead. All enemies in this area are dead.
Yeah, and obviously it was a criteria code to prevent you from moving forwards into the next area until you killed all the enemies.
Exactly.
But what had happened, and I still fathom to understand this.
We have no idea how it happened, but it did.
Every time we left an area, we actually saw that bit of code, and then when we reached the last area, whenever the protagonist got up to a wall or an object, the bit of code would appear in shot, as if it was attached to the player. How this happened? I mean, obviously it's one of those things where the code wasn't correctly camouflaged properly, or silenced properly.
Because usually that's another piece of code that's used on it.
Yes, and the best I can guess is that they copied and pasted bits of code and not copied and pasted the right bits. But Jesus Christ, did it stand out? And it's plain text as well.
Yeah, this is not like code, like super, like complex code, like zeros and ones or functions. No, this was a criteria code. It basically meant that when the enemies are killed in that area, a door would open. That code is supposed to stay. Oh, I hear echo.
You're right.
Blacken.
Yes.
I hear echo.
Oh.
I hear echo on your end.
Oh.
Oh, no, it's gone. Wait, no, it's still there.
Hang on. Uh, where's my sound option? There it is. All right, let's turn that down a little bit.
All right. Nope, still hear me. Okay, there we go. Yep, that's better.
Okay.
Oh no, never mind. I still hear me. Back in.
You
Fix
might have,
shit.
You might have to live with it.
Oh my god. All right. Anyway, basically, oh, that's gonna be annoying. Basically, what happened? I don't know. Is it coming from your? You have You have a headset on, don't you?
Yep, I have a headset on.
Okay, so I shouldn't hear my voice. Okay, now it's gone.
I moved
anyway,
my microphone slightly further away.
Okay, that might do it. Okay, so basically, the criteria code is supposed to stay attached to certain doors in the area. That way, when the criteria is met, the door opens.
Mm-hmm.
Simple enough. Somehow, an extra piece of code was put into that game that would cause it to stick to Jake. That's the only way that's possible.
I'm guessing what had happened is that the code must have attached to the character so that when they reach the door, it does it as a sort of like a what if statement. Like if the areas all the enemies are dead in the area and this character moves to the door, then open the door. Otherwise, don't open the door.
Yeah, if anybody watching this has an explanation, please.
Oh yeah, please let us know, because like I would love to know why that's the case and how they fucked it up so badly.
Yeah, but yeah, what you say does make sense. That would explain why it was stuck to him. But after like the last door is opened, that piece of code would basically be useless.
Well, I'm guessing that element of the code was probably coded specifically for that level, because obviously it didn't show up in any other levels.
No, it was just that level. But I think that was also the only level where it had you kill enemies to go through a door. I don't remember. No, never mind. The casino level let you do that too.
I'm just reminded of I don't know if this was the casino level, but because obviously there was the scene where you're supposed to go in and you're supposed to defeat the pimp.
Yeah, that was a glitch and a half.
Well, the first time that happened, like the main character ran through the door and an enemy ran past them and the door closed behind them.
Yeah, that was hilarious.
And then there was the other bit where the protagonist hadn't left that corridor, killed the pimp, activated a scene where you speak to the prostitute in there.
Yeah.
To basically find out what you got to do next. Then he entered the room, the door closed, and he had to kill everyone in the area, and then speak to the hooker, which he'd already done, to then get to the next bit of the sequence where you're supposed to run away from the police. It's like, oh, you managed a sequence break.
Yeah, that's not really a game that's meant for sequence breaking, though.
It just shows how badly it was put
together. There was a
though.
lot of bad design to this game. The fighting was horrifying. The
funny thing is that the fighting was probably the best bit of the game.
Yeah, I know.
And it's the fighting was
the most functional.
Yeah.
Like it's just the other issue is that like once an enemy had its guard up, it's really hard to break that guard. That's the biggest issue with the fighting.
Yeah. Plus, also when you hit an enemy that had their guard up, it didn't actually make a sound.
No.
And the sound it did make when you hit them, it sounded like you were beating them with a balloon.
That's another thing. The music and the sound.
Yes. Is this the game that the music doesn't loop?
Exactly. So the way that most games work is when they have a soundtrack to a game, especially where the specific area has a specific music, the soundtrack is put on a loop.
Yes.
That way, it still keeps everything going. For some reason, and let me point out, I have Audacity, so I can record stuff. I know how to put stuff on a loop. I don't know why, but the editors of the sound editor for the game did not know how to loop music.
Well, the funny thing is, I've dabbled around with Game Maker before, and I made something that was basically garbage. But even I could loop the soundtrack in that. Like,
It's not hard.
It's literally a function.
It's a button.
Yeah,
It's a button.
It's literally a basic function where you basically go, put this soundtrack in. Do you want it to loop? Yes, I want it to loop. So then when it reaches the end of the soundtrack, it goes back to the start. They didn't do that in this. And this was done by a development team. And they failed to do something that a random numpty was able to work out.
Friend who is working on his own game.
Yes.
He's doing it by himself. Like I know Black and you've helped out more with QA than me, but one thing I will say is he's making his game functional. He's making the music loop. He's making the gameplay elements work. It's a visual novel, but it works.
Yep. And that's the thing is that, yeah, like when you, this is wandering into different territory at this point, but when you're making a game, the first thing you want to do is make it functional. Like,
yes.
If you're making a platformer, don't make the sprites. Make blocks. Make something that's really simple, and then make the mechanics work, such as the physics, the collision, the sound, and all that. Then beautify it. Then put the sprites in. Then put the animations in. Like, because that's the bit that's going to take that's the bit that's going to probably take the longest is polish.
Yeah.
But it's also not the most important element. The polish is not the most important element. It's getting the gameplay to work. What happened in Bright Hell Retribution feels like they tried, because there's definitely bits in it that look like there was effort made to make it look okay.
Water effects specifically. The water effects were gosh darn beautiful.
Like they had
reflection.
They had actual scenes where they showed reflections in the puddles, and it's a rare instance of seeing that actually work, because even AAA developers still get that wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And this was an interesting instance where, and it only happened a few times, but when you saw the reflections in the puddles, it looked really good. And it's so, and it almost feels so bad in that sense, because they got that bit so right. Where was the rest of the effort?
Well, my assumption is all the budget went to that reflection.
95% of the budget went into
that one puddle,
and the other 5% went into the marketing.
Yeah, and then they decided, well, we have no more money. Let's wing it.
Honestly, like, Right Tail Retribution does feel like a game that ran out of money or time or patience.
In conclusion, I think what I could say about this game is that and I say this about a lot of games, they had the potential to make a good game and they botched it.
Yeah.
And they botched it hard because they didn't try.
Well, we have a number of games on our worst games list, and there's a few of them on there fall into that category of games that started out with promise, with bright-eyed promise, ready to take the world by storm, and then either like time or money or passion or skill ran out, and they just sort of threw together what can only be described as it's not even mediocre, it's just plain botch. The mechanics are loosely thrown together. It's obviously stolen ideas from other games and not stolen them well. It's just thrown them in because that's what popular games do, so let's put that in our game.
Yeah, instead of having an original idea, because very little of this was original. Gears of War, the shooting style was Gears of War, the combat style was Assassin's Creed / Batman Arkham Asylum, and the general driving
was GTA completely.
It's very much so, and the story premise was specifically Lost in the Damned.
Yeah, like it's a basic, and I'll say like it's a really basic revenge plot. But really basic. Like I don't feel any sympathetic motivations towards the main character at all. But I also don't feel the motivations of the antagonist other than to be a dick.
Yeah, he did it just out of jealousy.
Yeah, as like that's
not a great motivation.
No, that isn't. Like this whole motivational story is literally just people being dicks to each other and failing to stick their dicks in things.
And it really came down to this last thing I will say. The motivation for the bad guy was because the father did not give up his wife. And so he put a hit on the whole family. And it really came down to that because that hit apparently lasted 10 plus years.
Yeah. Again, like, even the story feels like something that someone sort of got from the back of a cereal box.
Yeah.
And then just basically went, let's make this into a game. And it's like, no.
I think that's all I've got for this.
Yeah,
I don't really have much else.
Well, we've gone on for about an hour now.
Yeah,
and
I think
basically, I mean, this font is dried up at this point, which is because you kill one of the pimps in a font. Oh yes, I wait to finish with that. Slow time events.
Oh,
Quick time events that basically hold up the gameplay, requiring you to interact with the scene. But if you don't interact with the scene quickly, it just stops the camera and stops all the action, waiting for you to interact with it. It's kind of like the press F to show respects scene.
I think the biggest one for me was in the church.
Yeah, when dealing with the pimp.
Yeah, you basically, and that level bugged me because like I'm someone who's religious, and not shoving my religion on anybody. You don't have to believe what I believe. But when it comes to church, I'm very, very picky about church levels, just especially in shooters, just because it's my own personal thing. And the way it was set up just felt very, very off.
Just like it was like very token.
Well, that too, but also like disrespectful for churchgoers. Like, I am the same way. If a level took place in a synagogue, it would feel disrespectful to those who are Jewish, or a level took place in a mosque. You know, you just feel the disrespect there.
I think it just depends on the context they're doing. I mean, obviously, the way they
in this game
was really poor.
In this instance, it was very, very, very much disrespectful.
It was tasteless.
Yeah, it was very tasteless. It was disrespectful to Christians because this was obviously a church, and you know, you ended up drowning the guy in a holy water bowl.
Yeah, well, you drown them in a font.
Yeah, and it's just, I don't know. As I said, it just feels weird. That's my own personal thing. Think of it as you will, but for me, it just felt a little too blasphemous for my taste.
I think what they were trying to do is almost like the Vegas vicar sort of thing.
Yeah,
like the pimp really did sound like he was like one of those Vegas vicars who's not really really a religious practitioner, but they're just kind of there, and you drown him in a font in a very unusual way that even the drowning animation continues playing when the slow time event isn't moving, so you could conceivably have him drown him forever.
Yeah,
but bottom line, the only thing to do in regards to if you ever think about Ride to Hell Retribution is if you are gonna play it under the understanding that you're there to engage in the shittiness, not to actually play a game.
This is not a fun game. This is not a game I would recommend to buy just for having a good time. This is a game where you go, is it really that bad? I need to try this.
Yes, like this is a game for the likes of me, who I classify myself as a crappy crusader, where I can derive enjoyment from playing shitty games because they are so shitty. That's the only context I would recommend anyone touching Ride to Hell Retribution. If you are looking for a game that is like a biker-based game, get Lost in the Damned.
Yeah, very much so.
That is, if you're looking for like a gritty sort of biker-style game, get Lost in the Damned. It's a good game. If you are looking for a game that is absolute garbage garbage within garbage, Ride to Hell Retribution is pretty much the peak of the pile when it comes to, I say modern day, like more modern day shitty games. I mean, Jesus Christ, our list consists of some of the real cream of the crap.
I mean, we just finished watching Ravens Cry.
Oh god, yeah. I mean that's a topic for another day.
Yeah, and I don't even know if I don't even know if we're gonna cover it for podcast.
Nah, I mean, like the podcast idea came up after that, so we'll probably look at the one that you're doing at the moment.
Yeah, The Ring. It's not going to take us long to finish The Ring, so we can have that podcast done within another couple weeks.
Yeah, but yes.
I'm looking. You know what one I'm looking forward to?
What's that?
Fallout 76.
Oh, dude.
Oh, that's gonna be one we're gonna enjoy.
That's gonna be fun to look at.
Oh yes, well, and it will be base game. It's not gonna be the patched version.
Oh god, no.
It'll be base game. Patched versions. I will admit, patched version of Fallout 76 is better.
Well, it kind of falls into like the No Man's Sky thing then, of like it came out shitty and has been patched into decent. Yeah.
Is it a great game? No, not by far. But they made it functional.
Yes.
Anyway, I'm EvilDeathAzul.
Yes, and I am Professional Idiots blackendrose. This was the researcher review on Ride to Hell Retribution. I should think next time will be The Ring Terror Realm. I think that's what it's called.
The Ring Terror's Realm.
Terror's Realm, close enough. And yes, I hope you guys enjoyed it. So we're two of the three Stooges, and we will see you in the next podcast.
Bye.
See you later, folks.